Here I go again on yet another journey to Manchester in the wintry hours of a Saturday morning. I sometimes find it hard to believe that 8 years on from MPRV News' humble beginnings that we have reached the landmark of 1,000 episodes. It certainly was not planned that way, but DIY punk is like that, where you get on a train which seemingly now stops. The silence of my journey on many occasions helped me to come up with new ideas for MPRV News. This particular trip was focused on who we should feature on our 1000th episode. But the burning question was who? But of course, TNS Records have not only been a huge influence on the DIY punk scene for many years, but have been very instrumental, along with their involvement in the Manchester Punk Festival, for MPRV News' very existence. As I rolled into Manchester, my memory went back to my very first experience with TNS Records. Strangely, it was not in Manchester, but far closer to home. TNS Records were on tour and had arrived in Stafford. One burning memory was the sight of TNS tattoos, a sign that TNS were very much part of these people's lives. After so many years of filming an ageing street punk scene, I was taken aback not only by the energy of the bands, but by the audience that followed them. Already I was starting to film closer to the stage than I did with the street punk scene, as my body absorbed the energy of these bands and audience like a sponge. I had boarded another train, the DIY train, and I never ever want to get off it. This train though, I will get off, as I head over to what I loosely call the TNS house. I'm sure others in the DIY punk scene share MPRV's thoughts on this.
TNS Records was very simply the only group of people who were doing any punk music when we were kids, and when most people who are into punk music in Manchester were kids. So, what is TNS? TNS is punk rock, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, because of Andy, Bev, Kaz, Big Hands, there's loads of things that I've always wanted to do that I never would have been able to do without your faith and goodwill and support, as is the case for the rest of the band as well, in Incisions. And yeah, we're just eternally grateful for that reason, as are all the other bands. You make us do shit that we dream of doing, and thank you for your support.
I guess what TNS means to me is it's a sense of community that's kind of grown from something quite small and into like something huge. You've got all these DIY venues working together, and you've got lots of like different bands that kind of represented that otherwise probably wouldn't have the same representation if everyone was trying to do it on their own. They've kind of built something that works really, really well, and it builds a stronger community, and there's a lot of inclusion and representation within the scene, and I guess that's what TNS means to me.
Hello, this is Max Motherfucker from Christmas. We are touring the UK since pretty much 10 years now, and since the first days, the guys around TNS Records have been a very big help for us. In the beginning, they shared contacts with us. Later, they set up shows, invited us to the Manchester Punk Fest. Andy jumped in on the bass guitar for a show at us, and they turned very good friends of us. In 2020, they finally released a record with us, Hot Nights in St. Wendel, and they've been always good friends and good helpers. Thank you very much, everybody.
First met TNS maybe 2011, 2012 maybe. I got asked to get involved in Strummer Camp Festival, and we went to the meeting and TNS were there, and then from that point our friendship just sort of developed. We started doing gigs together, and then that eventually led on to Manchester Punk Festival. They've been a massive part of Manchester, even though they're both from the Midlands basically, which no one likes really, do they? But they're basically adopted Mancunians, and it can't be understated the difference that they've made to the Manchester punk scene. And that's the only time I'll ever say something nice about them. So enjoy it.
But in the gig scene was basically run by fools. They pay you with vouchers and then fuck off. Pay to play your shit, we can't be folks with it. Instead the TNS gigs are now boss. And I am proud to make part of the family. Because I can't remain when I am old. And I am proud to make part of the family. One of my brothers, always been to the end. My back fucking fuck! Give me pills and go self-medication. Don't need to know I got self-identification. I'm trying to down and it hurts when I'm up. All I know is that my back's fucking fucked. My back's fucking fucked. Never mind, only 40 more years. Every night another 40 more beers. Makes you feel quite down on your luck. All I know is that my back's fucking fucked. My back is fucked. My back fucking fucked. My back is fucked. My back fucking fucked. My back.
This is a hard jigsaw. You've got lots of lines to follow, make it easy. Celebrating 100 releases. You should definitely buy one. 1,000 pieces. Who would have known it? 1,000 episodes and 1,000 pieces.
So this is the TNS garage. It's not like TNS has run out of a garage. It is run out of a garage. So we've got a mix of MPF and TNS stuff. Got some nice bottle of hot sauce. Very nice. I had some of that this morning. Then we got so occasionally stuff gets damaged in transit. So we'll do something like we'll put some screen printed covers on them and do them limited edition. This is where they do all the packing. All vinyl. So what happens with the vinyl? When we've got a pre-order, Big Hands and Kaz pack all the vinyl and the CDs, and then once we've done the pre-order period, like stock of vinyl comes to my house and I pack, well they sort the envelopes for me and I slot the vinyl in for orders. I'll show you that later. And then we used to do loads of CDs, we do less CDs now, so we've got loads of old stock. Some of these will be given away at MPF, some of them still sell a little bit, the ones that still sell a bit are around here. We've got a CD distro, we've got a vinyl distro as well, but that's at my house. So this is stock of other labels stuff. And we've got some there that's MPF ready, so that'll be on sale at MPF. Loads more CDs, loads of packaging material. And then in here, we've got free pre-orders at the moment. So this is all packed. So basically, this will be taken to the post office en masse. So Big Hands will meet me after work. There's a post office next to my work, and the post office are very nice and they always sort us out, so we can just walk it straight into their back room. We've got a card, so it just gets sorted. So we've got all this to drop at the post office in the next week or so because we've got free pre-orders. And then also we've got all Big Hands drum equipment, knife club merch and stuff as well, because we seem to think it's a good idea to play in a band as well.
And the Christmas tree.
Yeah, Christmas tree.
Big Hands. Show us your big hands.
All right, I will ask that. How did you get the name Big Hands?
I've got big hands. It was supposed to be Fat Hands, I think, and they got the quote wrong, and it kind of stuck. But yeah, literally as straightforward as that. Got big hands.
What has been your favourite part of being a part of TNS?
Do I like any of it? No, it just being a part of something that helps so many people. Really, it's like we sort of touched on before. It's always about, for me, it's getting more people to go to gigs, more people to listen to music. Any little thing that we can do that sort of makes that easier and better for people. It's a lot of hard work, but then everyone puts a lot of hard work into it. Everyone working together makes it a little bit easier. I'm just glad that I can be a small part of it.
And I was talking with Bev about delivery day, and then they come to your house, and you get release day. How is that?
Well, originally, I used to take all the deliveries at my workplace because I work for a repair centre. We've got a massive car parking yard and everything, so it's dead easy. The van would turn up, drop the stuff off, and I just take it straight home. But then for some reason they started bringing them in on these big Arctic lorries, and the Arctic lorries used to come in and block all our delivery drivers in. And it didn't go down too well at work, so we had to start getting delivered to Bev's house, then I'd have to go pick them up from there and get them back home. So it's a lot more running around, but it is what it is. I don't know why they come on a big Arctic lorry sometimes, because I mean, although you do get quite a fair few, they will just fit on a van. But like Bev was saying before, it's great when you see the final product as well. Like, there's so much work that goes into it before you get to see it. Actually seeing it and like getting to, as you're packing it, you're looking at it as well. It's really good to have that physical part of it, especially considering a lot of music now is going, obviously it is streaming, and it's just good that there is still some physical products out there.
Yeah, and you do put gorgeous vinyl out, so like you say, opening it up, there it is. But is it stressful doing release day, getting all those things packed and out?
It can be when it gets near MPF, because like we've got 3 fairly big size releases all around MPF, and when you're trying to do all of it in one go, you sometimes think, shit, when are we going to get this done? During the year when it's spread out, it's not too bad because you can plan ahead, because you have the pre-order. You can get a lot of stuff prepped before the record even released, arrives, and then by the time it's release day, you've done most of it already anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it all builds up and you've got 2 or 3 in short succession, it can get a bit stressful.
Like this year?
Yeah, you just have to plan it. Like I had a few days off work last week, so I managed to get loads done on those 2 or 3 days, and it means when it gets a bit nearer to release day, I've done most of it already.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's a few late nights. It can take a while to get some of the stuff done, but as long as you've planned it and you know when you're doing it, you can get through it fairly easy.
Yeah. Do you have a favourite release on TNS?
Everything I'm on.
That's not fair.
No, it's... I mean, there's certain bands that I like more than others. Obviously, I'm not going to start listing them. I think one of the beauty is, I mean, Bev and Andy, obviously, they're more involved and they choose what releases they're doing and stuff, and a lot of the time I won't hear some of the albums until it arrives, so it's really good to hear it as soon as it arrives, and there's been some that I've been more excited to hear than others, but they always seem to choose really good things and good projects to do, so I think there's nothing that I don't like.
Yeah.
But I think Andy's mentioned that before, you've got to put out stuff that you like, or else what's the point in doing it?
Exactly. What would your advice be for a new DIY label or somebody thinking about doing it?
Literally just do it. Like, you will make mistakes and there'll be things you'll think as you go along that make things easier. But if you just talk about it, you're never going to do it. You've literally just got to do it. There's people out, especially in the DIY scene in the UK, if you want to set something up or do something, there's enough people there that you can just go, oi, how do you do this? That can you give us a bit of advice on it? And they will do. No one's precious about it. Everyone wants to help each other out. If you've got an idea that you want to do, just do it. Someone will help you do it.
Do you think the UK DIY scene is a bit more unique in that, or have you seen throughout the world where you've been?
I mean, it's hard to say because realistically, I've only really seen it in the UK and a bit of Europe. When we first started touring Europe with Revenge was probably when we started to see a lot of these ideas and how people did it. Especially with 5 Feet Under in Denmark, we saw how they were doing stuff over there, and it was like, well, why don't we do it a bit more like that? And that's where the ideas came from. I don't think anyone can claim to be unique in the scene because everyone's learning off each other and everyone's got their own take and idea on everything. I don't think I could say that really. Everyone works off each other, I think, in the DIY scene. Well, they should do anyway.
What's your best lesson you've learned from doing the label?
Probably similar to what I was saying before. If you've got an idea and you want to try it, just do it.
Yeah.
It might not work. It might work, but if it doesn't work, you'll learn from it and you'll come up with better ideas. I mean, the worst thing you can do is just not even bother trying. You've got to give it a go if there's something that you're passionate about and want to try and make it work.
And is there anything else you'd like the world to know or to talk about with the label and DIY?
I'm being waved at you. Big hands, show us your big hands. Yeah, the will to know about my big hands. There you go.
That twat. Welcome to MPRV Cribs. Come this way. Some stuff I've wasted my time doing over the years. Some stupid bands. That was quite good. Yeah, remind myself I haven't wasted all my time doing shitty punk bands. I mean, I have done that, but... So yeah, so not everything is in Big Anne's garage. So come this way, this is my little back room. So in here, got I made that when I was 8, I think, or 10 maybe. It's quite good, I think. They didn't have all the punk badges on there. So this is a load of very early TNS flyers. First ever TNS gig. I screen printed that myself. That's a signed photo with the person who made the Psychotronic Man film. It was pretty good. That's our best, most profitable release. So basically what happens is Big Anne's half packs the orders, does the envelopes, and then I have all this spare vinyl stock, all the tapes, all the fanzines are down here in 7 inches. Kind of split into 2 parts this room, so that's my fanzine collection down there, so I don't sell any of them. And then that's my CD collection, which I can't bring myself to part ways with here. So that's the not sell section. This is the most famous coat in punk rock, probably. So this is our distro. So this is, well, some of this is TNS stuff, but this is mostly stuff we stock from other labels. Yeah, more in here. So yeah, it's kind of, the operation works like Big Anne's does the pre-orders in the garage, which you've seen, and then when we've got normal orders, he'll just print the labels for the envelopes, bring it along with a sheet and say, can you add this? So the vinyl that's stored at Big Anne's is just kept in the boxes, and then all the loose stock is here for me to just top up orders. So yeah, this is the second part of the packing order operation. I have got a little bit in my bedroom as well, so come in. This is where the magic happens. I don't have sex, I just do magic. But yeah, there's like t-shirts here as well. So yeah, basically just fill your house with stuff you can't sell. That's the way to live, isn't it?
I think I'm going to start by asking what is the meaning of That's Not Skanking TNS?
Oh well. This one's kind of been lost over the years. There's multiple memories of what it means. I think, and I'm normally right, that we were playing this gig in our old band. We were in this band called McGraw. Why is everyone laughing at that?
And I think your memory's going on.
We were in this band called McGraw, and we were playing this gig, and there was this ska band supporting us. And they did that thing that sometimes bands do where different members of the band are playing different songs at the same time, and it's just a noise. And but people were dancing anyway, because it was like those sort of all ages gigs where people just moshed at any noise that's happening. And the singer stopped it and went, "Whoa, whoa, what's going on here? That's not skanking." And we thought it was really funny because, you know, what a sentence that is, and it was the best crowd reaction they got of the night to a hybrid song. But Adam, who was the singer in McGraw, thinks that it happened at a gig around the same time where we used to work in this social club in Stafford where we grew up, and we put on a gig, and the local running club came into the gig, and one of them got really pissed and he was doing some elaborate dancing. So he thinks that was the first time it happened, but I think it happened at the ska band, and then we thought it was funny, so we shouted it at the runner. But it was like, it went out, well, 25 years ago, and it was like 1998 or something, so when the sentence came about, so who knows. But then when I started the fanzine, I thought that's quite a funny name, because I quite liked the story, which I probably remembered the story properly at that point, but...
And you mentioned the fanzine. You started as a fanzine.
Yeah, so I quite like the idea of fanzines really. I got into like football fanzines when I was quite young and did an art degree, and I liked all the sort of art zines you could get. And then I came across like punk fanzines, and I thought I'd quite like to have a go at writing one. And when we had the first TNS gig set up, we thought just giving a flyer out outside like a Rancid gig or something with a load of bands no one's heard of is not going to encourage people to go, even if it's a free gig. So we had this idea that we'd try and get people interested by having a fanzine and using that to promote the gig and doing interviews with the bands, taping CDRs to the front because it was well before MP3s and stuff, and trying to get people interested in the bands that way, and we thought it'd be a more interesting way of doing it. But we also quite like the idea of a fanzine as a way of documenting things that were going on as well. So that's how it started as a fanzine, but it was kind of, the idea was to use it to promote a gig as well.
So the gigs and the fanzine started at the same time?
The fanzine started about 6 months before, I think. You're not going to remember, are you? Because we lived together at the time, didn't we? And the first fanzine, we went to Oxfam near where our house was and photocopied that ourselves. And
was it before?
It was definitely before, because I've got all the early fanzines and they've got adverts for the first gig on them. So I think we did like 5 issues before the first gig. But I think we had an idea of doing a fanzine every once a month at the start, which is obviously ridiculous. And that didn't last very long at all. But
a month.
No, I think we might have done like 3 in the first 3 months when we were excited by it. You know, it was a slippery slope to being numb to it all.
What was the scene like back then for you here in Manchester?
It was quite different. Like, I guess when I moved here, I was living in Stoke and then I moved here, and I thought there'd be loads going on, and there was all these famous venues you'd read about, like Band on the Wall, Night and Day, Roadhouse and all that sort of stuff, and you thought it'd be amazing to play at them. And all the gigs we could get at those places were those pay-to-play deals, and we were like, oh, it's a bit odd that. And then, you know, you'd sort of do some of them at that point because you had no other option, and you'd be on these really bizarre lineups where you had to sell a certain amount of tickets or you didn't get any money or anything, which we weren't asked about getting any money, but it just seemed like an odd way of doing it. So that's kind of why we started putting our own gigs on, because we'd always put on our own gigs in the past anyway. So we thought, what's the point? We'll just put our own gigs on and try and do it in a way that we can actually get bands we like to come and play here. But we were looking for stuff. We were going to a lot of the academy gigs and the bigger punk gigs and I guess the early post-hardcore stuff and that, weren't we? And flyering that sort of stuff, but we weren't finding loads and loads of DIY type gigs, a few old school type gigs. I remember particularly one of the earliest small gigs I went to was the launch of a rockers shop, and that was the closest thing we'd sort of come to the similar sort of thing we were looking at, really.
I think the town we came from, there wasn't really any DIY gigs other than the ones we put on, was there?
Oh no.
So the thing I remember when we came to Manchester was we were just so excited about being able to go see all these big bands at the Academy week in, week out. I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say there wasn't like a DIY scene in Manchester. We didn't know it, we didn't see it.
Yeah, it was.
It wasn't obvious.
It was harder to find because before when I first moved here, I didn't have the internet at home. I didn't have it on my phone or anything like that. So you had to find out through flyering. I think the launch of the rockers shop was big actually because it was a sort of central hub where people could flyer and put stuff out. But I guess one of the biggest things for us when we moved here, we thought it would be easy in a big city to put on a DIY gig and people come. Because in Stafford there was nothing happening, in Stoke there was nothing happening. So you'd put on a gig at like the Firkin on a Tuesday and you'd get 80, 100, 120 people sometimes. And then Manchester, you like put your first one on, there's like 15, 20 people there. But I guess you had a similar experience, didn't you? Because you did stuff in where you grew up and like rock nights and stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in kind of on the edge of rural Wales. So there wasn't a lot, but there was at college there were kids that put on shows in like village halls and things like that. So they were always well attended, like you say, because it's always college people. And we put, we do like club nights as well in our town, and that was well attended. But you put on a gig and it's harder. So yeah, it's a bit different, isn't it? There's a lot more options in Manchester. But I guess when it's hard knowing a scene when you're younger and you move somewhere. So I guess when you move somewhere, it doesn't feel like there's a scene as such, and it might be that you don't necessarily know it yourself.
Yeah.
And like you say, you go to the bigger gigs. So yeah, it's that time where it's harder to find things.
Yeah,
so.
like Mozza, one of our mates, is obviously he's from here, and he said there was a DIY scene, but it just wasn't as visible, and it was for a number of reasons. Probably harder to advertise something of that scale. But like you say, if you've moved here, it takes a while to find stuff, doesn't it? At the best of times and in a bigger city.
There was that strange time as well between a lot of people didn't do fanzines or flyers anymore because it was like that's an old thing that people used to do. It was before the internet became
dominant,
as prominent as it is now. So it was just like a bit of a grey area in the middle where no one knew how to promote a DIY gig or something like that. So this is why I think the pay-to-play gigs were so popular, because the promoter didn't have to do anything; you just let the bands do it.
Yeah.
So when did putting on gigs become a record label?
2008.
2008 was the first release, came out in April. So before, so I met these guys from their Revenge of the Psychotronics first tour. My friend from back home, Liam, was in the band as a guitarist, and through various things I became asked to just drive them on tour, help out. So I was at uni, so I said why not. So this was whilst TNS gigs had just started, maybe going a year or so.
Yeah.
So then I came in and just helped out, and through it must be how many years we've met? Maybe 4 years, 3 years?
3 years of touring, I guess.
3 years of just being in vans, touring around the UK and Europe, talking about stuff, seeing things. We kind of had a conversation probably in a pub or
in the back of a van.
Or in the back of a van. And it was like, because we'd seen lots of bands across the country. You kind of get frustrated that kind of gap between all this cool stuff you see all the time and what happens in the mainstream media, because I guess when you're younger you just like look at big magazines or what's happening at Academy and you're like, why can't these amazing bands that we see get picked up and pushed forward? And then it's kind of comes back to that ethics of, if you want something to happen, do it yourself. So it's out of those discussions, because these guys had done through the fanzine, they'd done like CDRs and put things out. Me and my friend Liam had done a compilation separate, and so we knew we could get the bands, we knew we could get the music. It was just like, let's try something. And, yeah, decided to start a record label, not knowing anything about it. Not that we do now. So yeah, that was the case. I can vividly remember Googling how to start a record label. It wasn't even Google then. I can't remember, but yeah, sat in my
Yes, Jeeves.
yeah, ask Jeeves. Ask Jeeves what
82 out of
in my student accommodation.
And when did you realize this was starting to get serious?
Is it serious?
Oh, as serious as it can be.
I think we've just gone step by step, haven't we? We haven't necessarily been serious.
I think,
Well, by serious, I mean you're putting out a lot of quality releases, not just one here or there or a compilation. You're putting out
I think it's
some really incredible stuff.
I think it's slowly growing. I think the first vinyl's feels a bit serious. Getting some reviews in some magazines from nothing. But we slowly kind of grown from Manchester local bands and then did kind of northern bands, and then we got through connections to bands from further down south, and then it was Europe, and it was like doing joint releases. So it's like a very steady growth.
Yeah, and I think that we talked about this quite a lot. Like, so you don't sort of see the difference when something changes so gradually. You're just doing little bits, and not overthinking it necessarily. Just doing the thing that you're doing and taking each release as it comes, and then you get to some sort of milestone, like I guess the 10-year anniversary or the 100th release, or even that things that happen to the bands, like sometimes like a band being played on Radio 1 or going to Maid of Vale or something like that, and you suddenly go, right, this is actually quite different to 15 people in the upstairs room at the Diversity Scholar, isn't it?
It's weird though, because I don't think anything we do is particularly big as such.
Not at all.
So
But
it's always like hard to get to. You know, we're not doing massive press-ins with it. It is nice. Yeah, I think like the 10-year anniversary where we put on a big gig, and there's like a lot more people than we thought would come to it. And there's moments like that. Maybe get the first vinyl pressing, actually doing that. But it's so incremental and moves forward so gradually, and it's just so hard to sell records. But it never feels like we've done anything particularly massive, to be honest.
But you have, trust me, you have.
Well, nice.
It's stuff like this label that keeps the scene alive. You guys are helping produce and promote new music.
I think it's important to say that I guess this is just a view of one of many, as in like there's so many small labels doing incredible stuff.
Exactly.
And I don't think we're particularly special, and there's a lot of people doing things a lot better than us. But there's just lots of people doing really cool DIY stuff, and I guess we learn off them.
Yeah, and I guess the community aspect is so huge to us, because I think even with the first compilation, you were looking at like what a successful DIY tour would be, and you're thinking, right, okay, we can get a few people into a Manchester gig now, so it's worthwhile this band that we've met, who we think are really good, coming to Manchester and playing. And then you go into somewhere else, a different place in the country, and you're thinking, right, it's worthwhile playing here now. And what we were trying to do, I guess, with that compilation is connect all those bands and connect those little scenes together, because there's all these pockets of exciting things happening all over the place. And to be fair, they're all quite small individually, aren't they? But you combine them together, and suddenly you've got something that's a bit more substantial and a bigger community, and that snowball means that like suddenly labels are a bit more sustainable. Suddenly bands are more sustainable, because they can do a tour where they're going to play to a decent crowd every night. They can release a record where they're probably going to sell a few copies. And I think that connection of different communities into sort of an overall bigger community is massive, and that's why the DIY scene thrives, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and if you go from trying to sell 100 CDs to Manchester, there's like probably not 100 people that are interested. But if you do that 10 to each community around the country, then it grows together. And I think we'll probably come to MPF later, but that's kind of where that's come from, the nexus of like just everyone working together, bringing scenes together. And if we just had that base out of Manchester, it's not that big. But if you bring everyone that's interested in DIY punk from the country, then you start to build something more sustainable and bigger.
And you talked about other labels, and you do a lot of co-releases with different labels. How does that help both you and the other label?
Well, I guess you've got different audiences, haven't you? And getting a crossover to different audiences is huge. But I think at the moment, the best thing you get out of a split label release is getting out to different countries, really, isn't it? Like, so we've just done one which has got 7 labels from 5 different countries, and you don't want to be in a position where you're competing for sales, but if you're doing it to a new audience where people aren't necessarily going to buy that music or come across that music, then that multi-label approach is really, really effective, and it, you know, and
it makes vinyl pressing cheaper.
Yeah, totally.
There's, by scale, going over like breakpoints and things, you can actually achieve things, spread the risk a bit, and work together to make it achievable where otherwise it would not be affordable.
I think it's worth saying, though, it's always, I don't know about YouTube, but I've always, it's always about, you've always wanted more people at gigs and more records to be sold, and like you said, like, you don't want to be competing for sales and stuff, but I think every decision that's made is to make it affordable. It's not, you're not competing for a sale, you can't afford to put this thing out unless you get the money back in to pay for it.
Yeah, well,
and I think that gets lost a lot. A lot of people might think, oh yeah, well, you know, they're trying to make money on that. It's no, we're trying to make it affordable to do that.
Yeah.
That's at the end of the day, it is just to get people to come to gigs and buy records and hear music. It's not necessarily competing for sales for that reason.
Yeah.
It's more, there's no point in 2 labels putting a risk in on something when one label can make it viable.
Mm.
I mean, it's a cliche, isn't it? But not for profit doesn't mean for loss. So you do need to break even for something that's not for profit to exist, and you know, and without people buying stuff, and without, you know, people working together to release stuff, it's not viable, because this isn't anyone's job. This is a glorified hobby, isn't it? And without that group of people working together, these things can't exist. And by that group of people, I don't just mean the labels and the bands, I mean the people who buy the stuff as well. You need people to buy a ticket for the gig, you need people to buy a record, and that's just as important as the people making a record, isn't it? It's an actual community where every aspect of it is important for it to exist and for it to thrive.
Yeah. And I would go so far as to say, you 3, along with others associated with you, have built the Manchester punk community just through your dedication and your hard work and your releases like this.
Yeah, well, there's so many promoters in Manchester. I think that's how it builds, is because it's like 6, 7, 8 different promoters all putting things on, and it like sustains itself. It's like so.
Yeah. Over the years we've been here, which is over 20 years for me and you now, is it for you? It must be.
Yeah.
But Manchester's got better at collaborating, absolutely. Like, people work together all the time and teams overlap, and and there's lots of dedicated people who work very hard for their particular area of the scene, but making those areas overlap just builds the audience even more, doesn't it?
Yeah, because like, we don't really we don't put gigs on anymore, because we stopped doing it because we can't do everything, and there was so many people putting on amazing gigs that we didn't need to as such. Because that gave us time to concentrate on everything else we do. So outside of the festival,
Yeah, but you replaced it with the Manchester Punk Festival, doing the smaller gigs.
Yes, that takes up all that time.
And probably releasing more records as well.
Yes.
But MPF and actually releasing records is overwhelming in of itself, isn't it? So to be trying to put on gigs alongside that, or do the fanzine. I mean, I would actually like to do a fanzine this year, because it is 20 years since the first fanzine this year. So I think that'd be quite nice to do later in the year, and I've been speaking to a few people who might want to collaborate on that. And then next year, 20 years since the first gig, So maybe we'll do a TNS gig next year, maybe.
This is 15 years since the first release.
Yeah.
We'll
Just
do,
like to
we'll
have
do a
loads of
release.
birthdays. Though.
Should we do a release this year?
Yeah, we'll do a release.
When it comes to releases, how do you pick what bands you're going to put on the label?
It's tricky that. Sometimes we just like be at a gig. More so in the past when we were perhaps touring more and a lot more gigs, and we just see a band playing, and we used to just have this knowing look, didn't we? And go, yeah, that's
I
happening.
think the first time that happened was Beat the Red Line.
Yeah.
So that was like we just kind of went, yeah, let's do this. Others, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think we just keep an eye out, and if something sounds right, then we'll go and watch them. And or sometimes you watch a band and go, we'll message each other and go, oh, this band. We'll just see. I think they fit. And I guess we've got a sense of what works for us.
Yeah, because there's loads of bands we love. We've actually had bands that we genuinely love asked to release on our label, and we've said no because we don't necessarily think we're the right label for them, and we've sort of said maybe speak to these. And I think I always worry that those bands have sort of taken it as not being into it. But someone said to me in the very early days, they said, you don't have to release every band you like, you have to release the bands that work for your label, and that's great advice.
But you also have to release bands you like as well.
Yeah, well we do that, don't we? Like we do release, everything we release is something we're into, but then there's other stuff that we're really into that doesn't work for TNS sort of thing. So mostly I would say it's bands we've seen live. There's a handful of exceptions, typically
international bands.
Yeah, international bands and stuff like that. But typically it's stuff we see live. We really like the idea of a band having a go at doing something themselves first. So again, that's not exclusive, it's not for every release, but it does work quite well if a band's done like a self-released EP or an album and they sort of know what goes into it, because the level we're operating at, we're not big, so we can't suddenly push a band to a new place on our own. They need to be putting the same amount of effort in as if they didn't have a label, and then we're adding something else to that and working with them.
We just do this in our spare time, so it needs everyone's involvement and work. So we're working with a band, we're not working all the time. We don't necessarily sign a band, we just help them out putting their releases out.
Yeah. And that's the whole DIY ethos. You want to have them doing it, you doing it, everybody else involved doing it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone's got, we agree.
What has been your biggest challenge as a label?
Selling records.
Yeah. Selling enough is always the biggest challenge. It's a cliche, but we feel like we work for every sale. Like sometimes you'll do like a bit of a push on social media, or you'll go to a gig and you'll give out a load of flyers or whatever, and then you'll get 2 or 3 sales coming off the back of that, and you think, oh, I spent like an hour of my life working for those 3 sales.
Actually, yeah, you're talking me out of it. Should we?
Yeah, can I have a beer, please? So that is the hardest bit, selling stuff, and just getting. I think balancing it with full-time work and other commitments is really hard as well, because you sit down sometimes and you're like, we could do this, we could do that, and you have all these great ideas, but you've just not got time to implement them because you go into work the next day. And I think if you were doing it in a more full-time sort of way, you could easily see how you could get things out to more people, but obviously it's just not viable to do that.
Yeah, and you get, I don't know, yeah, I feel like sometimes frustrated. I want everything to be brilliant, and in my head I can see how we can progress further and do things, but it's just time. We always take on too much, don't we?
Yeah, it's really hard when there's a load of releases you want to do. And you think, we haven't really got time to push this properly, but sometimes you'll be like, we can't not do this one, then we need to do this. And like that's another reason why you say no to some bands who approach you, even though you really like them, because you just think this is overwhelming to take something else on at the moment.
At times it just dominates life alongside MPF, it's just all consuming. Like, it's what I think about in the shower, or trying to go to sleep, and you're running around, oh yeah, we could do that.
Well, I remember when you and Kaz first took over the orders, and you came round here one night, and I was trying to sort them, and I'm not. You two were incredibly organised, as you've seen in the garage, and I was not. So I'd be like in my wardrobe, just chucking CDs out of boxes trying to find something, and spending like 4 or 5 hours on
in
it.
the corner, rocking back and forth.
And you two were like, "Shall we just take this job off you?" I was like, "Please, please, please take this job off me."
So that's how you divvy up the work. You guys find your
I have a
natural
breakdown and
talent.
Big Ann sorts it for me.
That's it.
Yeah, I've no longer got boxes of CDs hidden in my house. I was like, I remember getting them all out of my loft and go, "Here you go, big hands." All CDs.
We think something was sold out, wouldn't we? And then like 2 years
Oh yeah, I
later,
just found,
we're like,
I found a box of CDs and sold.
which could still happen.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
When you do releases, you've been over the past few years doing a lot of picture discs and colored vinyl. They cost more, but is it worth it?
Coloured vinyl does cost a little bit more, but I think it's nicer product. We like Andy's saying with the fanzine and that side off. We like physical things. It's like, what's the point? And that kind of the colour comes into it, like matching with the artwork or different variants, and it's.
I mean, I quite like black vinyl, but I think making it collectible is quite good, isn't it?
Yeah, put a limit on it. So it's another button that's pushed on kind of helping sales as well. But yeah, picture disc, we done once.
It went well, though, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think, oh God, who was it? I think I was talking to Tommy from No Time in America, and we were joking about picture discs, and I was like, oh, actually, yeah, no, let's just do it once. So we did that for Pizza Trump because they're really easy to put a pizza on a pizza disc. On pizza disc? Pizza on a pizza disc. A pizza on a picture disc. So yeah, that worked really well for that. And that, I was worried because we had to charge more for that because it's a lot more expensive to do. But it was a nice, different thing to do.
It was a good band to do it for, though,
Yeah.
because it was always going to sell well, that album. So.
It was a different album. I made like pizza boxes for the first 25 people. I think it was the album before. And then me and Sam bought a pizza, cut it up, and then wrapped it in cling film, and then put that in like the first 25 orders got a slice of pizza with their order.
Did we meet someone recently who said they'd still got that?
Mike Hennessy put it in the freezer, and then I think he varnished it, and he's still got the pizza.
That's serious commitment. Thank you, Mike. You're a star.
So yeah, it is nice. It is again, it's a time thing because each one of those boxes are like spray painted and like things printed on it. But
do you remember when I made Casual Nausea sick bags?
Oh yeah, I was
at work. The state paid for that. Just screen printed their logo onto sick bags.
So we do try and do a few things like for pre-order, like we're packaging Bruce Controller. So we've got like first 50 got a unique print with that. I think it would be a cool thing to do more of if we have more time.
Done a nice zine for the new Knife Club though.
Yeah,
it's got some fairly decent photos in. Some guy, I don't know who he was.
I do like picking the discussions and picking the vinyl colours, and yeah, it's a nice aspect. That's a nice job, isn't it? Hello.
You're the marketing guy, aren't you?
I guess so. I send out the emails, yes, and try and keep social media going as much as it depresses me. But yeah, it's got to be done. You've got to try and sell things. So yeah, I do quite a bit of that.
Where do you get your ideas from?
Do you listen to the Richard Herring podcast? I don't know. I think I try and absorb as much as possible from what other people do. I think every different idea that we've had or thing we've attempted to try and sell records is probably stolen in part from someone else. So I think with things like that, it's just trying to absorb as much information. If somebody does something that's really interesting, we'd probably try and think about how we can do something similar or take the ideas to try and sell records.
Theft in that sense is a good thing.
Yes. Oh yeah. We've got inspiration from everywhere.
Yeah.
If there's so many kind of things even outside of my music probably that you see somebody doing something interesting or cool, then we'll try and do the same or in the same vein, I guess.
And what has been your biggest challenge with TNS?
Biggest challenge? I don't know. A lot of the time, it's like just balancing life and everything else that we've all got going on. There's many late nights trying to set up releases, send stuff out, get things going, and yeah, you have to be efficient with time. I think we just, like we've discussed earlier, it's like sometimes things don't go as well as you expected, or it's hard to sell, and then it's trying to keep going and trying to get stuff out as much as possible.
What's been your favourite release from TNS?
Oh, every release that Revenge of the Psychotronic Man have done. I don't think I've got a favourite. They're like your children, aren't they? You can't pick between various releases. I'm not going to pick a favourite, but we've done, and I think it probably depends on the mood you're in. I'm really proud about a lot of our releases. So we've done some really interesting stuff and worked with some great bands. Yeah, so every release Revenge of the Psychotronic Man I've done.
I remember seeing a video of you.
Oh no.
Yeah.
There's not many of that.
And it was scary.
Okay.
And you were getting a delivery of vinyl. What is delivery day like? Because it looked incredibly overwhelming.
Oh, it's not too bad. We actually had 3 arrive last week, so it's at the moment it's just a pallet that needs shifting out of the rain outside in the house, line up to get it across the big Anses. So the first, I still remember the first time we got the CD, like the first compilation arriving, like coming home, and there was in my corridor at my student house there was 11 boxes of CDs, and that first feeling of actually opening up a release and seeing what's there is really good. But it is exciting to get a new release, check that it's how you expected it, see the colours, and it's not as impactful as the first one, but yeah, it's really cool to get something that comes and you finally got there. It's like you don't have to worry about whether it's going to arrive in time anymore. You get to see how it actually looks. Like Faint's Idea one that arrived last week was half and half vinyl that we've never done, and like seeing how that looks and what you expected and what you mocked up is it's really interesting.
And along with doing TNS and MPF, you juggle in being the photographer. Yeah,
I do a bit of photography. Only rarely these days, but that keeps me entertained. It's not much more of a juggle because it's just going to gigs and what you usually do. But it's good fun. Keeps me artistic in a little way.
Yeah. So editing takes a lot of time with that. Do you just try and squeeze it in?
That is, kids gone to bed one evening, just do it all in one go.
Yeah.
Get out. I think once you started, you just want to get finished and you're in your flow. So it's not too bad, not too time consuming. It'll just take up an evening.
How did you get involved in doing photos?
I've always liked photography, like growing up, but I think the first time I started doing gigs was going on tour with Revenge. So I'd help. I think Big Hands had a camera, so I started documenting it, and then I bought my own camera. So it was kind of, I guess, trying to be useful and do something else while they're playing a gig. I'll take photos and document it, and then I just enjoyed it, so I did it a bit more.
Yeah. What would your advice be to somebody just getting started doing this?
I think, well, like Andy says, do release stuff that you enjoy, you want to release. It can be hard work, but I think the interesting thing about DIY is that you know that you can do stuff yourself. There's people that you can ask for advice, and also you can work things out, experiment, and it's going to be lots of hard work, but it's good fun at times.
Is there anything else you'd like the world to know or you want to talk about?
Well, no, I think all I can do is echo Andy's comments and say thank you for being, involving us in your 1000th episode. It's really appreciated. There's so many great labels that are the same as us across the country, and that keeps our DIY scene going. I think DIY is really important. You learn that you don't require other people, you don't require the state or big corporations to hand things to you. If you want something, you can work with other people, you can do it yourself, you don't need to rely on the world to supply something. And I think that's an important lesson, not just in music, but in the world and how you approach life. That we're not reliant, we're not just consumers, we can produce what we want to happen. If you want change, you can make it yourself, even if it's in a small, incremental way. So I think DIY is important for that, and that's one of the best things about the punk scene.
You're not just records. You also release some other merchandise. What's been your best-selling piece of merchandise? Records or T-shirts or anything else?
We've had some good sellers, haven't we? I mean, this did well.
Made on TV.
It's helped by someone wearing it on ITV News, and then ITV News having to apologise for it. Basically wearing an obscene publication.
I think that T-shirt probably paid for a release.
I think it did.
Or two.
I think we did like 9 printing runs or something.
Certainly.
And the best thing about this T-shirt is I had that idea, and I'd been out, and I was fairly intoxicated, and I got home and I thought, oh, I just made that. So I made it on my laptop, and I completely forgot I'd done it. And I opened my laptop the next day, like much later on in the day, and I was like, oh, forgot about that. And then we shared it, and it had so much interest, we were like, let's just make a T-shirt.
Yeah, I think you messaged it to the group and went, should we make a T-shirt? I was like, yes, yes we should.
It literally took me about 3 or 4 minutes to make it. And then I looked at it after we'd agreed to make it as a T-shirt. I thought, it is done. It doesn't need anything else. It's my most productive use of time ever. So the moral of the story is, put a swear word on something and don't try that hard on it. That did well as well though. We were only going to get 50 of them. I mean, it's not strictly TNS, but we were only going to get 50 of them, and then we got so many pre-orders, we were like, maybe we'll get 100. We ended up doing like 250.
That sold more than some Revenge albums.
Yeah. So, someone out of a TNS band...
What's your best-selling disc?
I mean, it didn't sell more than some...
Some.
TNS albums?
No.
Revenge albums. It didn't sell more than any Revenge albums. No. It sold more than some TNS albums.
It did.
Which one?
I don't know. It depends how many we sold. How many
250 clocks.
250? No, I suppose everything at least 300, isn't it? Not far off.
Yeah. And the CDs. Should we just delete the bit where Big Hans is factually incorrect? Although someone out from the TNS fans did message me and said, what the fuck are you doing releasing a clock? Why have you done this? And it had sold more on pre-order than their album had done on pre-order, but I won't name them. He knows who it is. Begins with P and ends in ook.
What has been your biggest challenge as a label? Has it been vinyl production? Has it been just one that you thought was going to be great and it's just flopped?
I think the post-COVID stuff, where the vinyl pressing went to a year, that was hard.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a gap there. I don't know, we've not had massive challenges, have we? As in, like, we've made lots and lots and lots of mistakes, but we kind of changed how we approach things, I guess, and try to learn. You'll see how many CDs and things are in Big Hans' garage, but I think that was still...
Even that's probably, it looks like there's a load left, but it's not compared to the amount that we've bought.
Yeah, we've released over 100 albums now, or releases, so we're always going to have stock left over. I don't know.
I think sometimes we're at a point where we can't really afford stuff, and then we do something, don't we? Like we'll do a sale or something. And I think the beauty of it not being our job and not necessarily needing, not taking any financial income from it, is that you just don't do something if you can't afford it, do you? You say, right, well, we're not able to do this now, but we'll do a sale, we'll try and sell a load of this stock or this old stock or something like that. And typically we've managed to get enough in to do everything we've wanted to do.
There was so to start with, me and Andy put money in to pay for the first few releases, so we were owed quite a bit for a while. But over time, then that's covered itself, and then we just cover ourselves now. And because we don't take a wage, it allows us flexibility to not everything has to be perfect. We can take risks on things that we think won't necessarily cover its costs or come close to covering its costs, and put out good music because of that. And then we've done enough now over time that some things can fail and it's not going to be disastrous for TNS.
But like I said before, putting that T-shirt out probably did allow you to make a couple of risks.
Well, it definitely paid for a album that didn't cover its own back, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Although, can I have some money?
No, there is none.
Have there been any disasters?
We've had releases where the band split up almost immediately after, and you're like,
and we've sold 50 of 1,000.
Or you repress a record and then Bev finds a couple of boxes that you forgot he had and you didn't need to repress it.
Still We still sold those, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and then the band split up, and then we were screwed. But yeah, there's nothing disastrous. We can just, we're flexible enough. We carry on.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to make profit, are we? So there's no, real problem with the model we've got. Is that it's not so big that you're gonna go under if you make a mistake, is it?
If our pay and rent depended on TNS, then I think we'd be run very differently. We'd do different releases and we wouldn't be around very long. And you'd have to be at a massive scale to do that. And we're just tiny.
And talking about MPF, your lessons learned from TNS, have they come into how you approach MPF along with the others?
Well, so MPF kind of started, so we had our 10-year party, like a big gig, which was twice as big as we'd normally do. Or, yeah, close to twice as big as we normally do. And then it was kind of, we had the conversation after that, it's like, how do we top that? And then we tried to get a festival together. We thought, let's do a multi, involve lots of people, and do a multi kind of promoter event. So we tried that once, we asked too many people. We couldn't even organise a date for a meeting. That was going to be kind of 6 months after the last TNS all day. And it just didn't work. We just couldn't get a time where everyone would sit down. So that kind of like put that on the back burner. And then we spoke to Moving North, Kieran, and Anarchistic Undertones, who Tree, Danny, Tom, who were all doing gigs, lots of like amazing events. And they had, we all came from like knowing how we worked, how to put gigs on, how to run things, and we all had a basis. So kind of that knowledge from TNS and what they do really helped start MPF off. I think different people had a different level of expectation or planning towards.
I think a big thing, we've done quite a bit of stuff with AU before, like we co-promoted stuff, haven't we? There was perhaps more crossover there, but I remember we were at a Moving North gig and it was really busy, and you were thinking there is a tiny bit of crossover, but there could be more crossover here, and you're thinking a lot of people who go to TNS probably get really into some of these bands and vice versa, and I guess it kind of came from that, didn't it? Like you thought, if you could combine these crowds, you've got a big event here, like you've got a much bigger audience than us on our own. It's a classic thing we've talked about already, isn't it? Collaborating and working together, like you can do something that's a bit bigger if you do that. And I would say one of the biggest successes of MPF has been that you have managed to combine a few scenes, and when we're sorting the lineup now, you're looking at bands who don't sound anything like each other and saying that's a problematic clash, that, because we've been successful at getting people from different scenes interested in different bands, and that is the worst day of the year, that, and it was absolutely horrible. Sorting out the running order of MPF. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, then I'll ask you about your albums. You've got over 100 now. Were you planning that from the beginning?
No.
Subconsciously. Because there's this classic story where I made Mikey, when we did the first TNS release, he said, why have you put the catalogue number as 001? He was like, as if you're going to do 100 releases. And then
We did.
we did. Yeah.
I think we only did that because that's what everyone does. It's got a point. But anyway, yeah, we didn't have any plans past doing a compilation. I think we probably discussed.
We had
before the
ideas.
compilation came out, we
plans,
must have started planning the next couple.
Well, we always used to put revenge albums out ourselves. Anyway, I say albums. We always put revenge releases out ourselves anyway. So kind of assumed that would be a thing, but it wasn't like you say. Never discussed it.
No,
did
there was
it?
no,
It
there
was
was
just-
no grand plans to keep doing this for the rest of our lives. Flash forward 15 years. So tired.
Which brings me to my next question. Are you already planning release 200?
Yes, but no, we don't really plan that far ahead. To be honest, we have a rough idea of what's coming down the line, but don't. I think a lot of other labels are a lot more organised, and at the start of the year know how much they're putting out that year. But at the start of the year, we don't know how many releases we're doing. That
I mean, how
year.
many years did it take to get to 100? How many years was that? 12, 13?
Yeah, we release a lot more per year now. But no, we haven't. We probably don't know all the releases we're putting out this year yet. We know a few, and a few where the bands have promised it, but whether they actually sort themselves out. Jim, get your vocals down.
I feel like this is an interrogation.
Interrogate away.
What has been your proudest moment with TNS?
I think the 10-year anniversary gig was up there. Like, we talked about when you get to milestones before and you have like slight changes in what you're doing over a period of time, you don't really notice it, and then when you got to that and you thought, right, there's a big crowd here and there's bands who play to small crowds week in, week out in tiny little venues playing to a big room and everyone's going wild. I thought, that's nearly cried. I did cry. And then the 100th release was quite big as well. Like, we spent a long time on doing our nice gatefold vinyl, and yeah, I mean, 100 releases, you sort of think, right, it is a glorified hobby, but it is something we put a lot of time into, and we should be proud of that, really. So that's nice. I think I'll probably pick them two out for TNS specific things.
And what has been your best lesson out of doing the label?
Don't bother. No, you just got to adapt, haven't you? Like, I think probably things you thought were the right way of doing stuff, when you have a bit of experience, you'll sort of go, okay, maybe we've got that slightly wrong. I've always been really precious about what I've done, and being a bit more flexible with that is probably quite useful, and thinking, right, okay, this is something that isn't just for you anymore. It's like people are buying this music, people are listening to this, the bands need to be sitting in the same place as you, and I think just being able to adapt and be a bit flexible about how you do things is really important. And also, I guess the biggest lesson probably is you've got to enjoy it. I think there's been times where MPF and TNS and bands I've been in have been absolutely overwhelming, and I thought, I'm just sort of carrying on with this because it's what I've always done, and I need to enjoy it when I'm putting this much time and effort into it. So sometimes taking a bit of a step back and thinking, right, this needs to be fun, is really important. Hard to do that, but important.
Have you ever thought about saying, I'm done, next release is it?
Constantly. I'm thinking it now. No, it's hard to say. I think sometimes you think, where do we go from here? And then we sit down and have a conversation about how you can change things, how you can reinvent it. Sometimes you need a bit of space from it. Certainly need a bit of time out from time to time and do other things. I think that's important, getting a nice balance and do other things as well as just concentrating on music all the time. I think it stops it being fun, and it can be overwhelming if you just spend all your time on it. So yeah, I think when you feel like I need some time out from this, it's probably a good idea to have some time out and just take a step back for a bit.
And you seem to have the flop house for all the bands that come through.
Yeah. That pub we were just filming in, there's been loads of great parties in there. So yeah, like I think the most people I've had staying here is 14, and it's a 2 up, 2 down. So people are just, hello. She loves it when there's 14 people staying here, don't you, Ziki? Yeah, but it's ridiculous. Not so long ago, I had 2 bands staying. Oh. And keep this bit in, adds a human touch. I had like 2 bands staying, and I went to bed about 4:30. I just left them in the pub. I went to the loo at like 8 in the morning, and they were still going quite hard. They looked like they were having a great time. But yeah, I think it's really important that when touring bands are about, that they get somewhere to stay, and we've had loads of bands or people at gigs putting us up over the years, so I always try and make sure if I'm free and I've got space that people can stay. And it is funny, it's kind of nice to hang out with bands you play a lot of gigs with outside of the gig context as well, because it's obviously lovely to be at gigs and hang out at gigs and stuff, but then you've sort of got like your 20 minutes of chat and then a band, 20 minutes of chat and then a band, and like having a bit of a party after a gig. It's sort of how you get to know people a bit more. I think that's really lovely.
And does everybody like
Zeke? Yeah, she's a bit bitey with some people, but I think so. She's cute, isn't she?
She is gorgeous.
She's met a lot of bands over the years. She's 13 now.
Ah, yeah. So she's their groupies.
She's named after Zeke.
Hmm? What would your advice be to some 20-somethings like you guys were, thinking about starting up a label now?
I mean, the obvious funny thing to say is don't bother, but I think release music that you like listening to and you are proud of, and the bands you enjoy. I don't think you should go chasing stuff that's not your thing. You need to do stuff that you're actually into, so you're proud of your back catalogue. Yeah, and be aware that a lot of stuff you try and do, even if you're passionate about it and really believe in it, it might not go as well as you think. So you're going to have peaks and troughs all the way through it, and sometimes things that you think are going to go really well won't, and try not to take it to heart. And you'll get criticism as well, like, because a lot of people will say, oh, I would have done it this way, I would have done it that way. And the beauty of the DIY scene is if they really think that, they can go and do that. But there will be people who criticise what you do and say, oh, I would have done that differently. And you just have to try and not take it to heart, which I found very difficult in the early days. I'm a little bit better at it these days. A little bit. Not loads, but a little bit.
Anything you want to talk about?
Thank you for doing this. We really appreciate it. It's amazing you've got to 1,000th episode, and it's a privilege to be on that episode. And I think, like, going back to what we were talking about in the shed, like, of people working together and stuff, it's really important that everyone collaborates, but also documenting things. Like, there's lots of ways you can document stuff, like, and the stuff you do massively documents lots of exciting things that aren't documented elsewhere, and that's amazing and really important. So cheers for doing this.
Thank you.